All right, this is my third time trying to record this, so hopefully this one works. Hi, I'm Nile Marsh, and this is my second video response for Language in American Life. I want to talk about the theft of Native American language by white colonists for the purpose of obscuring history and rejecting culpability, specifically in Massachusetts, although I'm sure it also has happened elsewhere. Okay, so in Janet McIntosh's 2020 paper, Whiteness and Language, which we read optionally for the Indigenous Language Politics class, that was, I think, on November 6th, she says that, quote, in North America, where the settler colonial project was about displacing and eliminating Indigenous people to make a white nation, European arrivals felt no pressure to learn native languages. After all, many had already subscribed to the notion that a language contains the genius of a people, and they had no intention of giving up their own. I want to expand on this by adding that the Europeans, while they were not going to give up their own languages, they did steal parts of the native languages to use for their own purposes. And I'll argue that the land in Massachusetts that was taken from its former inhabitants by force often still bears indigenous American names in an effort to both ignore and deny the history of horrific and genocidal practices in this area. It's basically like the state is saying, hey, we didn't commit genocide. There are languages everywhere. Like, how could we have committed genocide? Like, linguistic gaslighting. For example, a park near the Charles River bears the name Pequisset after the tribe that used to live there back when the first grist mill was built in Watertown in the 1600s. But that tribe remains federally unrecognized and receives no benefits from the government. And their history of violence at the hands of the European colonists nearly resulted in their extinction. McIntosh also writes that when settler colonial policies shifted from exterminating to absorbing Indians, language took on new importance. The perceived three-way link between language, blood, and land would thus be disarticulated, assisting the cause of white cultural and economic supremacy. This can be seen in the modern theft of indigenous words in combination with the historical denial of indigenous sovereignty through renaming. A really good example of this is what happened with the Charles River, which is described by the EPA as the most prominent urban river in New England. It's 80 miles long, it runs through 23 different towns and cities, but for thousands of years before it was the Charles River, it was the Quinobequin, which means meandering in the Algonquian language of the Northeast. The Quinobequin was a major travel waterway and food source for indigenous North Americans for thousands of years before the arrival of the Europeans. But when English explorer Captain John Smith got here, he made a new map and renamed the river the Massachusetts River after the people he found here. But then he presented the map to King Charles I, who was only 15 years old, and said, hey, you can pick new names to replace these barbarous names. So the 15-year-old named the river after himself, and the name has stuck. It is now the Charles River. I found an analysis about this that I like a lot. It's called The Indianized Landscape of Massachusetts by Mark Jarzombeck, and he identified Smith's map as the first move toward a settler colonial teleology of erasure in New England. I think that's a really good way to put it. So European settlers renamed indigenous American sites as one of their many tactics to erase Native Americans from New England and take the land they live on. And in combination with today's denial practices, this is more than just obscuring history. This is the continued theft and bastardization of indigenous language to fit a colonial agenda. The agenda being obstructing the truth of what happened to indigenous Americans in their home in the Charles River in the state of Massachusetts, and rejecting accountability for the state's crimes committed against Native Americans. That's all I've got. Thank you for watching. Hopefully this one saves, and I'll see you in class.